Welcome to today's podcast, Neuro Blues, the neuroscience of breakups. How have you felt when someone you cared about or loved suddenly pulled their love away and separated from the relationship? I'm not only talking about romantic relationships, I'm talking about friendships, siblings, or parent-child relationships, a school playground event, or even in the workplace. I recently read an article about ghosting and how this feeling can adversely affect our mental well-being, where it can lead to depression. And what's even more surprising was that person who did the ghosting, they also can be adversely affected. You may be going through a breakup right now, or a long-term friendship has suddenly come to an end. The pain is deep, and that feeling of loneliness and sadness may seem to be too much. Breakups can trigger a grief response, and with any grief, we need to give ourselves the time to process this. I'm not going to patronize my audience by saying things will get better, because we are on our own journeys. That is up to us on how we deal with these experiences. In today's episode, we are going to shed light on how breakups impact our brains, physiology, and biology. We can hear about this notion of people dying from heartbreak when their loved one has suddenly passed away. Only a short while later, they also pass away. This is known as the broken heart syndrome. We can do things to support ourselves, and today, our guest is going to do just that. I am really excited about having today's guest on my You Got This podcast. The first time I met her, I was like, I need to learn more from her and spend time with this lady who has so much wisdom and so many experience to share with us from her career perspective, personal perspective, and also from the passions that she has. Today, I introduce to you Dr. Sweta Adatia. In just a few words, she can be described as a neurologist, an author, TEDx speaker, a coach, entrepreneur, and spiritual seeker. She is a neurologist currently working at Gurgash Hospital here in Dubai in the UAE. She has over 13 prizes and gold medals in medicine and neurology. She is a stroke fellow from the University of Calgary in Canada. She has over 50 publications in various medical journals. She is highly scientific and to date has touched over 50,000 lives. Wow, what amazing is that? She is specialized in treating strokes and migraines, and she really understands the pain of someone going through migraines because she herself suffers from them and can empathize with the agony of her patients. Sweta has worked in over 5 continents, serving many patients. She is a keynote speaker, a coach, and a trainer. She is the founder of My Brain Design, a 21st century mapping tool of the brain and the brain's preferences to the ideal career path for high school students and adults, something I think many of us will benefit from. She is the author of the book, Future Ready Now, a cutting-edge neuroscience-based exploration of career options. She has delivered over 200 workshops in various schools and colleges on this topic. In today's episode, we dive into this sweet spot of combining science with what it means to be human. Through her own story and how she used science to overcome, Dr. Sweta has taken time out of her very busy schedule to spend time with us, the audience of the You Got This podcast. A big welcome, Dr. Sweta. I'm truly humbled to have you here today, so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Monica. And you definitely got this. So I think talking about the brain is something which I love to do. I call it as my romance with the brain. So this is what I love to do. You know, although I joke and I say I'm a brain plumber, which means I fix broken brains. That's my day job. But what is very important for me is to kindle the normal brains. And I think today's topic, and when we were discussing this first, it was like, wow, you know, everybody goes through this, which is relationships. So I'm very excited to talk about the Neuro Blues for today.
Wonderful. And thank you again. So heartache, I'm sure many of our listeners, I can't say all because maybe someone is blessed enough not to have gone through heartache sure. in life. It affects us, you know, it can affect us neurologically, biologically, physiologically, psychologically. And we see like movies where someone's depressed because they've had a breakup and they suddenly go to the freezer and get their ice cream and they binge on that and watch sad movies because that's the response it creates within in us. So let's start with your own journey. This topic is important to you. What makes it so important to you?
So absolutely, everything what is experiential makes it even better, right? Theory is theory, but when you go through that pain, then that makes it absolutely special. So let me just quickly give a little bit of an insight about how I got an exposure to the entire this of what is breakup. Now, I had a very dear childhood friend and we were very close. It was almost like a family friend. She did not join medicine. She was more into the marketing side of it, but we grew up together, 20 years of relationship, and boom, one fine day, it's gone. It's like literally something was happening wonderful. There was all this love, care, share. It was almost like a sister. And suddenly, after 20 years of that relationship, without any sort of a discussion or any sort of a back and forth, it's gone. The person is no more in your life. So that was the time which was very painful for me. And that sort of, also played for a long time in my mind, that how can somebody do that? How can it happen to me? And to your right, absolutely what you pointed out is right, that the pain that you feel, in fact, science has shown that it can be equivalent to breaking a few bones. So it is a real physical pain, which although is seemingly emotional, can also be quite distressful. So I went through that cycle, and then me being a neurologist and a neuroscientist, I kept on thinking about it and wondered what is really happening in my brain. Why am I so sad? What is the entire thing about the breakup? That was when I started to do a lot of research in this entire field of relationships, social bonding, friendships, romantic love, and much more.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, not amazing that you went through that, but it's amazing that you were able to reflect on that process. So how did that experience impact you as a person?
Oh, there was a big, huge impact with that experience, So I always feel that you don't go through the pain, you definitely grow through the pain. So there's something called ghosting, right? That is what we talk about and we see in people's life. I mean, today's relationships are often like a right swipe, and then boom, you don't talk to that person anymore. You suddenly are ghosted, and literally in the brain, what happens is a smoke bomb which explodes. The pain of those chemicals which is released is actually making a person, I would say, dysfunctional for a period of time. So let me just talk a little bit about the brain, because I am quite interested. When I went through it, I was quite interested in actually the neurophysiology of it as well. Obviously suffering from it, but I wanted to also get out of it. So let's see what really is happening in the brain. So when we talk about the brain, as of now, also there are 3 brains that I have. So there's a little brain stem where I breathe, my heart is functioning. If I go a little up there is a little emotional brain, also called the limbic system. And then if you go a little up top on the front sides, this is the 2 sides of the brain, and that is called the frontal cortex or the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is very important. And obviously the emotional system is also equally important, because all the love, the share, the care, empathy, concerns, everything is coming from the limbic. But there is a cross connection and a dialogue going between the 2 sides of the brain. Now, both of this work like a switch. So if I'm highly emotional, if I feel the pain, if I'm absolutely, completely shaken up from that pain, my prefrontal cortex is going to be shut down, which means what happens is I cannot think rationally. The prefrontal cortex is all about what is right, what is wrong. Is this correct? Is this not for me? Is this serving me? What is the discrimination part of it? What is the empathy, the judgment, the intuition? Everything is coming from there. So now it is like a switch. So if I want to be completely rational in a relationship or clear as to what happened, my emotional system has to be toning down. So this is what actually is very fascinating for me, because most of the times when you have a relationship, may it be romantic relationship or a friendship, you go through stages. The very first stage is your emotional brain is engaged. It is involved. There is a flush of chemicals which come in, and one of the prime important chemical we all know about, that is dopamine. So that is that reward and behavior. I feel good. Wow, this is the relationship which is for my life. And it happens across. It's just not limited to the romantic relationship. Even for parents, even it's across all the relationships. And then what happens is there are expectations which come in. Then there are expectations which gets unfulfilled. There are this emotional upheavals that everybody goes through it. But getting that balance between the 2 sides of the brain is extremely extremely important and necessary, and that is what it was a learning for me in this entire experience. In fact, this was absolutely serendipitous. So when I had this sort of breakup, 20 years of a relationship, and the person is no more in your life, and she was very dear to me, obviously. I was going through this US, there was one webinar or seminar which was happening, and they said there is a functional MRI lab which is doing these kind of experiments. Why don't you try your brain? I was like, wow, let's do that, So interesting enough, that was about 3 months post this incident. So they were actually testing for people when they look at their loved ones, what is happening in the brain scan, and for the loved ones who have been away or there's a breakup which has happened. So I said, cool, this is the time for me, So when they did my functional MRI, and functional MRI for the viewers, it's a very, very simple technique, but expensive. So we don't do it often. You go into a proper gantry, you scan the brain, you see certain lighting up of the brain regions, particularly if it's the front side of the brain or it's the emotional brain, whatever is there, it lights up. So I go into this gantry very excited because it's just the time when I'm already feeling so down, already feeling so low. And the scientist was talking to me, hey, talking about the story, what happened to you, etc. and everything. And it was fresh. When it's fresh, the pain feels, right? You do feel the pain. You don't just talk about the pain. You feel that pain. So I was literally in tears and I said, this is what happened to me. And he says, all right, let's put you in the gantry. So I go into the MRI scanner, and the area which is lighting up is one of the areas called the ventral tegmental area, VTA in short, which is exactly the region which would light up if you are taking drugs, if you are an addict, So which means my brain was still craving that relationship. It was still wanting that. And there was no closure in the brain. And my prefrontal cortex was not working then. It was shut down. That was the reason I could not rationalize this entire thing. Now, those images actually stuck me. And I said, wow, this is incredible. Which means the pain that I'm feeling is real. The craving that I'm feeling for the relationship is real, and it is almost equivalent. So I would say defriending is almost like doing a de-addiction. So it was just a big opportunity for me as a personal thing to see myself. And then I was just observing what kind of other experiments that they were doing. So they got these 20 kids. They were all post-college kids, had a breakup, had a heartbreak, very recent heartbreak. So there were some images of a person who was actually touching some hot surface, which was shown, a person of a normal casual friend, which was shown, and then a person whom they were intensely in love, which was shown. In both the conditions, when it was love and in that touching a hot surface, the brain's lighting up was exactly the same. Which means that the pain that person was feeling from just remembering that, or the visual image of that friend, was actually almost equivalent to the one that the brain would feel in a physical setting of severe affection.
Whoa, that's mind-blowing, excuse the pun. So when we have a heartbreak, it's like we are potentially touching a hot coal and physically burning our hands.
Absolutely.
That's the impact of it.
That's the impact of it. And in fact, a few studies say that it's like a few bones are broken. The actual physical pain of that few broken bones is the one that you have during a breakup.
Amazing. That's so fascinating. The human brain is so complex, isn't it?
Yes,
There's so much going on in there. And even in your field, do you feel that we have all the answers?
Not really. We're just touching the surface and the scratching just over the tip of the iceberg.
So you found out that this was happening in your brain, and looking at those students or post-students who had suffered heartbreak. What did that teach you about yourself and your journey?
So I think this entire defriending, I think it's a process. So you have to give yourself time. I was so much in deep pain that I wanted some help. And that is the very first important thing, that you start to seek help. You want that support system, you want somebody to listen to you, what you're going through. That is what we call catharsis as well, right? In a psychological sense, you need to go and talk about it to somebody. Now, for me, entirely in the interesting thing, there were some lessons which came forth. And one of the lessons for me was that never have your emotional investment in one person. This is very, very important. You need to diversify even when it comes to friendships. The second lesson which I learned was that, emotional systems and rational systems are there to serve you. So there are two kinds of awareness. And this is a beautiful, beautiful study by also Dr. Lisa Miller. I'm a great fan of her work. She used to work with Columbia University. And there are two kinds of awareness that she talks about. One is achieving awareness and one is awakened awareness. So in the achieving awareness, I'm always about myself. Okay, this person should do this to me. This is how it should happen to me. This is what I can do. Everything is about the control. And that is where a certain part of the areas of the emotional system or the limbic system is actually driving or overriding the frontal cortex. So I do not see things as they are. I see the things in my view or my point of view or my light. So then if you have an awakened awareness, it's a completely different journey altogether. Now I'm more inclusive. Everything that I see around is kind of a union. Everything that comes to me is more like a message. It's more like a meaning. I'm not controlling things. I'm taking the control back to, I'm giving the control back to life. So between this achieving awareness and awakened awareness, that is what my journey was. It was a very, very difficult journey because the first thing was to come to terms with it. And most people do not come to terms with it. And everybody, if there are listeners who are listening to this and they have had this journey gone through, and as you said, blessed to those who did not have one, and thankfully that's the way it should be, you go through this cycle called the Kolb cycle. Very interesting cycle. The first thing when such a thing happens is, no, this is a denial, complete denial. It can never happen to me. The second thing what comes is, it's an absolutely, depressing feeling that why it should happen. And then you start to negotiate. No. I think let me just go back and fix it. I think whatever happened was not meant for me. There's something going on. You start to negotiate. And then again, you go through this very deep pain and agony. And then comes the acceptance. And there is a big time, I would say, lapse, which happens from starting of that feeling of that hurt to the acceptance. So for me also, it took a long time. And then I had to start to work what went wrong. And what went wrong was nothing with the person. What went wrong was nothing with the relationship. What went wrong was actually nothing to do with the circumstance or situation. What went wrong was my achieving awareness was trying to define the rules, which is not how relationships work. So that is what I learned over the journey, but how do you go from having an achieving awareness to an awakened awareness, that is what I think it took me close to 5 to 6 years. And then I started to study that also as a phenomenon, right? And I see about 20 patients every single day in my clinic. And I often quote this big, huge study which was done that what is the cause of stress in today's world? Do you want to guess what would be that study like? So what they studied was, in our everyday life, if we go through problems, what would be those major problems? And there were 3 of them which were highlighted repeatedly. Let's see if, Monica, you can guess what was that.
I'm being put on the spot here. Like expectations not being met, maybe?
Mm-hmm. But what was the bigger theme? So I'll give you a hint. The bigger theme was most people, it was relationship.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So relationships, maybe money.
Absolutely. Money, work, finance. Absolutely. And what was the third thing?
I have no idea.
Okay, it was about health, personal health. So these are the 3 common factors which people stress over. Now, if we look at our daily life, I like to do this little bit literally like a day audit. If we do the day audit, what are the common themes that we play around with? It's either dealing with our relationships and across the spectrum. It's either dealing with our work, profession, money, entrepreneurship, whatever it be. And third thing is related to our health, right? How much did I sleep? Did I eat well? What went wrong? Is my internal milieu, external milieu, is everything all right? So this is what people go through. And when that started to happen, and when it came to relationship, I started to get a little more interested, in terms of, okay, just tell me what really happened. And believe me, most of the experiences, most of the things that people told me was exactly what I was going through. So the moral of the thing was that we all go through the exact same cycle over and over again, and sometimes it comes as patterns. You have it once because your brain has not rewired. It comes again. So I was that fortunate person. Despite having this, I had this almost I would say equivalent repeating cycles with 2 friends in exactly the same fashion. And people say it's patterns, it's about the universe telling you something, but it's also about you not learning about yourself enough in the brain context or in the neuroscience context, which is inviting that. So I'm not surprised that it will not come back again, if you have not fixed, if you have not rewired.
And like, we're all going through this journey, like you said, and those incidents are like hints coming to us to say, actually, there's something that you need to do, something you need to change to break that pattern.
Absolutely.
Well, so thank you for sharing your own experience and then providing that professional insight into that. I'm a huge believer in, for us to overcome those pains, that we have to go through a journey. Like, we have to face that pain and then do what's necessary, like you said, from the awareness to the awakened, because then that will help us become free. So when you went through that, what did you do around this whole kind of self-inquiry point of view to deal with that pain?
Absolutely. So in that entire self-inquiry process, so by the way, there's a Japanese term, I love what they say, it's about kensho or satori. So satori is like a little insight, you just quickly get an insight. So for example, I'm talking to you about my journey, but you get an insight and you say, oh, I think I relate to this and I need to just get over with it. Or you go through that kensho, which is the deep pain, and then, you go through the little bit of a trough and then you sort of come up with all the insights, but with pain, obviously, that is the part of it. So as I was doing a lot of studies, I came across something which was very unique to me. And I think if people are listening to this and are going through this experience, there's something called attachment theory. So how do you relate to your relationships? That is very, very important, So there are many, many varieties of attachment. And the very interesting thing is, you don't just build that as you're an adult, as you're going through your genetics, as you're going through your epigenetics, which is just the environment, you develop those traits. The 4 parts are, there is one called the anxious attachment, which means I'm always careful. Oh, I should not let this person go. I'm always on the guard. There is a second variety, which is kind of disorganized. They're not too sure if they're emotionally connected. They're not too sure if they want to go back. So it's always a back and forth. And then there is the last variety, which is secure attachment. They will, irrespective of whatever is happening in the relationship, they always feel secure. And I was one of those, and there are ample enough quick tests available for that online, right? You can just do, even if you go to my website, you can just find it. It's very quick and easy. What is the implication of that? I'm a great fan of these kind of deep inquiries because they open up a huge learning opportunity. So for example, for me, it was this anxious attachment. And for the other person in the thing was a disorganized attachment. So they would go back and forth. They're completely casual about the entire relationship, but it would pain me. So how do you go from that anxious attachment to a secure attachment? What you do in your brain? What are the things that you bring in your lifestyle? What are the things that you do around? Now, we all live a human existence, and brain is a social animal, right? So there was a social scientist called Dunbar, and I love his finding. He was an anthropologist. What he showed was that if there are apes and monkeys who live together, let's say you're living with 10 other monkeys, depending on the association with those monkeys or the relationship, the cognitive part of the brain, the vocabulary part of the brain, or the language part of the brain started to develop. Which means for our neurodevelopment, we need the relationship or the circle of influence, what we call. And he gave this number of 5, a magic number of 5. So 5 close people, 15 friends, 25 not so close people but inner circle people, and 150 people for our life. Now, these are very, very important things to note in life. Now, he said 5, right? Which means you need to have that diversity. You need to have that emotional investment into few people, not into one. So again, that was my biggest learning, which I talked about earlier. So there are so many insights from the neuroscience perspective, which is absolutely there, but we don't use it in our, literally everyday life. So for me, going from the achieved awareness to awakened awareness, going from an anxious attachment to secure attachment, going from understanding that you need a diversification of investment of your emotions, that was a journey in by itself, And then in that process, if I just get excited when I talk about the brain. I always say it's my romance with the brain, And I run a lab called Limitless Brain Lab. I'm very curious to see people who are peak performers and who have done some fantastic things in life, leaders, athletes, professionals. And I think, Monica, you have come there and you've seen how we do the brain scans, right? So I told my colleagues, at the lab, I said, do my brain scan every 3 months. Let's have a linear, longitudinal review of what is happening in my emotional cortex and my prefrontal cortex. Because when we do all these studies, we find that people who are emotionally regulated, people who can modulate their emotions, people who have a very, very well developed prefrontal cortex, right? You really have to have a thick, absolutely connected, very well, I would say, orchestrated prefrontal cortex. That's when they do very well in life, which means they understand life from that awakened awareness. So when I started to do my scans, I said, okay, let's have this as my brain diary. We keep on watching and seeing all the practices that I'm doing, all the inquiry. I think the question was about the self-inquiry. And then all the things that I have been doing, what is it impacting? How is it changing? What really is happening in the process? So it is still exciting because I'm still in that process, but very well aware now of what happened. And end of the day, scientists love to have the data as well. Oh, was there a change? Very much a change.
And when you look back at those scans you've done over time, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen?
So my prefrontal cortex is slowly starting to take shape. The connections between the emotional system and the prefrontal cortex is trying to make a change. The limbic, you remember the firing that I just spoke about, which is related to the drug addiction, that ventral tegmental layer, it's sort of cooling off or it's almost gone, So these are the changes which would happen to anybody. But again, the question is, would you want to do it consciously and what you do for it? And I strongly feel, and what has helped me over the time is, of course, understanding all the bits and pieces of relationships, understanding how people's behaviors and personalities are. And we are all unique and distinct, we all have to accept each other as we are. I think the other thing which helped me personally was some of the breathing routines in my life, the types of the meditations, very, very, very serious, about making the change that you want to. Not just from a physiological change, not that, I want to make my brain beautiful, but I want to make my life beautiful. I want to be at ease with myself. I want to love everybody. I don't want to have over realistic expectations. I want to be in part and unison with people where I accept them as they are, accommodate them as they are, try to blend into this entire, wonderful social experiment or relationships that we live with, So that is what happened. And it's just been still happening. And I'm still undergoing all those rigorous military practices, let's put it that way. I mean, it's not really military because over the time, it just becomes a part of you, right?
And it's like you build a habit and then over time that behavior becomes a habit, then it becomes automatic.
Absolutely.
Then you don't need to think about it. Like whether it's you practice meditation every day, like there'll be a point where it's not something you consciously think about. It's something you know that you need to do.
It's like brushing your teeth, right? Do you have to remind yourself, oh, it's morning and let's brush the teeth? No, you just do it, right? So brain has a very interesting ability. Now, there are circuits, and I think brain fascinates me because 100 billion neurons, trillions of synapses. In fact, the third trimester, when the baby is in the womb, the rate of growth is 250,000 a minute of the brain cells. 7,000 synapses a second when the baby is born. And like, wow, every little thing, what is happening is just incredible when it comes to the brain. In fact, the cerebellum or my balance machine has a million connections into one single neuron to just keep me balanced. Now, we never, we get excited when a robot actually takes a cup and then drinks. Wow, and that I just do it naturally, right? And a robot, you have to program it and then, you have to make it happen. And then lots of money, millions of dollars goes into it that, robot is able to drink the water. I mean, we are just given this inherent beautiful ability to flow with all the access. I would call it the most important brain, mind, body, that what good Lord has given us. So in that process, what happens is, you have to make it automatic. You have to do it. But if you keep doing it as a subconscious practice, it sort of you just do it every single day. 45 days, some science papers say, some papers say 66 days. If you consistently do that over and over time, then sort of it becomes a part of your regular routine. And I'm a great believer that, you think, you act, then you behave, make a habit, that becomes your character. It's a cycle. It's a process.
And it's about proactively wanting to do it as well, isn't it? Like someone might be in a very positive and good place in their lives, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't do it, because it's about stepping up your game, leveling up, and also something could happen in the future. So almost being prepared for that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you want to live your best life, right? You have so much of potential. The possibilities are just immense. And that is the reason which actually led me to make the lab that, oh, wow, we have the same brains, but then why just some people are able to do it absolutely without any problem? And why do some people struggle? It's just the balances between the types or the sides of the brain, or it's just their experiences. We all go through these emotions, and emotions are very, very important for life. We have certain primal circuits or primal desires and need. In fact, also, if we talk about the sexual part of it, the sex itself is a primal drive, and where the area gets lighted up in the brain is very interesting, is when I feel thirsty. It's exactly the same area in the brain. So it is all about this everyday life that we will be dealing with. But the point is, again, am I aware? Am I conscious? Am I bringing my best brain forth? Am I bringing my best mind forth? And a lot of people have this tendency, again, that's a personality, that's a trait. You want to just push past your emotions. You want to just shove them off. You don't want to, just shut it out. You want to behave rationally and say, oh, I don't think so, I need to deal with it. But that's the worst to have in the brain. You want to surface up your emotion. You want to see them as they are and try to deal with it, because the farther you push, the longer it takes to come out of it, and what we call PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disease. And post-traumatic stress disease just does not happen in veterans who are fighting. No, it happens in our everyday life with even little childhood experiments. Since I'm talking about childhood, let me bring this beautiful experiment which was done. So what they studied was, if the infants were kept in that, between the 12 months, the first 0 to 12 months, observed by the caregivers. This was a beautiful experiment done in UK. What were the traits that we could extrapolate into their adulthood? That this was the study all about. So the caregiver would come, feed the baby the milk. They would observe all the emotions of what the baby is going through, record. The social scientists would look at their behaviors. What was seen was that some of the babies were very understanding, even if the caregiver could not reach in time to feed the baby. Some of the babies started to throw tantrums. Some of the babies were angry. They just wanted to that, okay, now you need to feed me more, and I'm upset and this. And these kind of traits sort of carried on until they became adults. So we everything that we do in the first few years of our life, and if there is any parent who is listening to this, I always say that 0 to 3, or right from conception until the age of 3, is all that you can do to the brain, because the sensory experiences, what I feel, what I see, what I touch, what I hear, is all very well developed. It's just that my motor abilities are less. And that is the reason why what the child gets in the environment, the multi-sensory experiences, you actually carried along when you're an adult. Enough studies to prove that obesity, heart problems, cerebrovascular problems, or problems with the brain, stroke, is all carried from those emotions or the attachment which is happening during the age of 0 to 3. Isn't that incredible?
It is incredible. There might be a parent out there feeling a bit guilty now with their teenage or adult sons, but what can we do to change that? Like, say someone looks back now and says, oh, I feel I didn't have enough of that, or as a parent, I'm feeling guilty. Like, well, how can they process that?
Absolutely nothing to worry about it, because there's something called neuroplasticity, and I'm a great, huge fan. And it's about 90s when we started to learn about neuroplasticity. Brain is not static. It's not like, oh, it's done and this is all that you will be. You can change, you can grow. The very act of understanding, the very act of achieving that awareness itself, which means the brain will start to regrow. The patterns would start to break. All the firing of the circuits would start to realign, rechange. So I don't think so. Even the age really does not matter. In fact, now the neuroplasticity scientists have said that the brain keeps on changing. In fact, it keeps on modulating itself every single day of our life. So whoever, at whatever age, it really does not matter. The day you start to understand that this is the firing pattern for me, especially from the emotional perspective of it. So there's something called the fight, flight, fear, and freeze. And we all have that, right? I mean, we still go back to our hunting days. We still feel, oh, there's a threat which is going to come. There's no tiger or a lion which is going to come, but there is a boss who's going to throw an email, There's going to be a friend who's going to boomerang the ghosting part of it. There's going to be some form of a work-related issue which comes almost like a lion or a tiger for the brain. So the brain is always trying to shove past that threat. The brain is trying to pacify that threat. In that process, every single time, the brain is only activating these emotional circuits: fight, flight, fear, freeze. And it's losing the most important part of it, the prefrontal cortex. And that is the unfortunate part of our human existence. Just understanding the power that it can give is just incredible, So you start to do more with less. You start to have multi-dimensional capabilities. The prefrontal cortex essentially is trying you to give that. You start to see the life in a completely new perspective. And that is what is very important.
Oh, amazing. So the brain, based on neuroplasticity, as you've said, we can actually change the pathways and we can take steps around that. So I would like to talk more about the brain because I think it's very fascinating. For anyone watching this on YouTube, you'll see we have props in the room with us. So please feel free to check out YouTube to watch this podcast. So how different are the brains of men and women?
Beautiful question. I love that question. I was just waiting. When is this question going to come? So we thought brains of men and women are very different, but that's not the case. The exact same size, give and take a little bit, obviously based on the body mass index of the individual or the connections. We thought, there is a very thick connection between the two sides called the corpus callosum in women, and that is the reason they multitask. It's all slowly getting all outdated because that is not what science is showing back and forth. But what is science showing is the neurochemical response when it comes to relationship is slightly different in men and women. And these are all important nuances for us to understand, especially if somebody is listening and thinking about a romantic relationship. It's extremely important to understand that. So when a first time sort of a relationship happens between a man and a woman, the man is only releasing testosterone. The woman is releasing also a chemical called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is all about bonding, pairing. We get it when we are cuddling, hugs, etc. give us oxytocin. It's very, very important to feel good. It's very important to feel nice, The woman is actually releasing that as well. So there is an instant emotional connection even during the physical meeting, while that's not true for the man. So the man is only doing that after a few times of the meeting, possibly with testosterone and oxytocin. So if we understand how the wiring of the brain happens for a man, so there's a beautiful study which is done which suggests that when a man looks and falls, we always say fall in love. We never say rise in love, right? It's essentially because of these circuits which go completely haywire when we say fall in love. So when a man is watching a woman, there's this visual processing area which is activated in the love. But when a woman is a part of the same process, there is the emotional circuit which is activated. There's a memory circuit which is activated. So if you look at love at first sight, if you go back years later and ask a woman, the woman would describe everything as is, even the smell, the fresh flowers, the coffee, whatever it was, but for the man, it was just the beauty or the face which is registered. So every little thing has a nuance when it comes to a relationship. And it is so beautiful that we have to learn to accept that or to even adopt that for that matter. Now, a man, give him a football, there is a football match which is going on. Try to take away the attention from that football match. It is not going to be possible. So it's not that they cannot attend. There's that monofocal attention towards the interest which is going on. Now, the same man, try to send him to a closet to find a pair of socks, which is right there, right in the front of the closet. He will not be able to see that, And the woman would wonder, oh gosh, it's just lying there. Why don't you look at it? No, because that is a part of the way in which their attentional circuits work. Now, the woman takes care of a lot of things, right? There's children around, there's multitasking happening, they're going for work, so many things happening. So at a given time, there are multiple circuits which are firing for women. So it's just incredible and interesting. In fact, I love that author, there's Alan, Barbara, and Peace. They have a book called Why Men Lie and Women Cry. It's a beautiful book, just giving these subtle nuances about relationships in particular. And since we are in this topic of love, there are a couple of stages which a romantic love also goes through. It's just, absolutely incredible in the brain to see what is happening, So as a scientist, let's say you're watching people fall in love. What are the lighting of the areas which are happening? The very first thing is attraction, right? In that phase, it is all about this beautiful chemical of the entire attraction which comes in, right? And there is adrenaline. Now, to the surprise, adrenaline is a stress hormone, or cortisol. That's a stress hormone. So in that attraction phase, with a little bit of a good chemical, you're also releasing these stress chemicals. Am I looking good? Am I behaving all right? Am I, doing all the things which will please the other person? So it's an internal sense of stress which is happening in the first phase. Second phase, a little bit, in the courtship, let's put it that way, you start to get comfortable. The hormones which are stressed out sort of comes down. There comes a phase, when you are now a little bit of serotonin, a little bit of joy, a little bit of oxytocin, bonding, pairing, which is happening. The third important phase is when the addiction sort of kicks in, right? Now you want that person. And then there is the circuits which we just talked about related to the drug, where you are literally wanting that reward behavior. Every single message that comes to you is giving you that dopamine kick, that dopamine reward, and you want that over and over and over again. So these are the 3 stages, 1, 2, and 3, which everybody goes through. Now, the 4th stage is very, very important. Let's say this love converts into a marriage. All right, the very first stage of stress converted into nice, beautiful feelings of bonding, and then nice, beautiful feelings, not so beautiful actually, of addiction. And then what happens is all the reality of the brain kicks in, because the 18 months period when this cycle is happening is over. It's all over. Now the natural chemicals start to come in. The serotonin, in fact, drops. Wow. So there is a huge drop in the serotonin which is happening, which can make you feel depressed as well, which can make you feel the same thing which was now giving me that pleasure or that reward is now converted into a lot of expectations, into the pain. So it's a beautiful, beautiful process which we all go through. Now, there are ways in which, as a scientist, it's just absolutely incredibly exciting to me that, to just see people go through these stages. But if you are aware, let's assume that, you're very sensitive, you're interoceptive, you're aware about your emotions and what is going on and all. Possibly, you can just joke around it, and and humor is a great crack way to just get or reset those circuits. I think that is the most underutilized way of coming out of the pain. So if you do that, I think then, you look at love from a completely different perspective. And I would call it a little bit of a sciencey love. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's very interesting.
So when we get to that 4th stage, so you've said the humor, the joking side of things. What else can happen? Because it's almost like it can be an anticlimax, can't it? So then, if say someone's going to be decided to be in a marriage for the rest of their lives, what can they do to ensure that that relationship continues to grow, but at a brain level, we evolve as well?
Absolutely. This is crucial, right? I mean, if you look at the divorce rates, if you look at the people's agony in the relationships which is going on, why is it? It's purely a neurochemical response to a lot of things that we just talked about. But what is very important is every day you have to treat your brain as it's a new day with the person. You do not carry the emotional baggage. You do not have those expectations that you carry on every single day. You do not form opinions. And brain has a beautiful ability to start to form opinions or start to form judgments. Again, remember, going back to the threat part, you always want to keep yourself safe and secure. And for both the people, exactly the same circuits are firing, right? So in a good relationship, I would say, in a lasting relationship, the magic or the neuroscience or the source of it is take it as is every single day. Try to re-invoke the same feelings that would be right there when the brain remembers the very first time of the feelings. And it can be done consciously. And you have to learn also a lot of let go. The let going process in the brain is only possible, I strongly believe and feel, is with gratitude and gratefulness. Every single day, spending time in being grateful to what you have, being grateful to a relationship which is serving you, being grateful to the process that you are alive, your brain is functioning, your mind is aware, and you're trying to do that. I think having that as an everyday practice is what makes one, have a beautiful, lasting, absolutely. I mean, I've seen couples who are wonderfully well even after the years. They feel like as though they've fallen in love just yesterday. And then there are couples who are just living, but there's no love left. It's all because of these emotional circuits and the baggages and the unprocessed emotions which you keep on harboring. I think the key is there was a there was a very interesting time in my life when I was going through all of this. I could meet a spiritual teacher, and I was 15 when I first had an exposure to what is spirituality. And spirituality has nothing to do with religion. And spirituality is all about self-awareness. It's all about understanding about who I am. It's about evolution, right? So when I was a youngster and when I was going through this in my initial years as well, so when I met this teacher and I was like, okay, she told me something. Put your mind on table. Do not dissect the mind inside your head. So I was like, I don't understand this. What is she trying to say? What she was trying to tell is process your emotions. Put your emotions on the table. Try to see them as they are. Now, watching your mind as is not easy. It's a very difficult task to do. And the question is, now this is a very deep philosophical question which comes in. Do I ever say I mind or I brain? No, I always say my mind. I always say my brain, which means there is some part of me which is not the mind. There's some part of me which is not the brain. Now, although this is deeply, I would say, psycho-philosophical or spiritual, but this is very important to stress the fact, and that was a big moment for me. That means when my mind was down, and if I become down, there's something going wrong mathematically there, If my mind is joyous and if I become joyous, there's something again going wrong because I am distinct from my mind. So what is that I? Who am I, How do I see my mind? So that is what was a big, huge revelation for me. And over the period of time, I strongly feel appropriate breathing practices. I'm a great fan of victory breath or Ujjayi, what we call it in Indian context. Victory breathing tries to separate you from your mind. So all the emotions you can see as they are. And emotions are going to be a part of life. You cannot become indifferent. You cannot become inhuman. You have to live with those emotions because there are these beautiful emotions. Like you look at a child, what do you see? Absolute sheer joy which comes in, right? You look at a couple who's just in falling in love, you feel that love as well, right? So you cannot say, oh, I want to just park those emotions in my parking lot and then go do everything else. That's not possible. How do I deal with it? Who am I in relation to those emotions? So all this was a big revelation.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Like in emotional intelligence, one of the key elements is self-awareness. Like the minute I understand what's going on within myself, what are my thoughts, reflecting on my past behaviors and past actions and having a relationship with me, then that helps me have a healthier relationship with other people. Like, because you'd use this analogy of taking your brain and putting it on the table. It's a bit like journaling, isn't it? When we write things down, we're emptying our brain because we're moving it from our brain and putting it on paper.
Absolutely. So scribing has been a very important technique in a psychological context to just let things go, let things be. And very important is to see them as they are then, because otherwise there's always this form of sort of a judgment which is inside. So I think you told a very important point, Monica, here, that self-love. I think in the journey of the love, it is very, very important to have that connection to the self. You cannot give love, or you cannot, I always joke and I say, I don't want to get love. I don't want to give love. I just want to be love. Because if you are that particular person who is connected deeply to your own self with self-love, with self-esteem, with self-respect, obviously that is what will come out with others. You cannot, it's like a little context that if I have only, let's assume $10 and you are asking me for $15, I'm not in a position to give you that, right? Because all I have is $10. But if I had $100 and you ask me 15, I would just happily give you that. So it's all about what are you harnessing inside? What are you connecting with? Very important and very, very interesting to have that,
It's this notion of abundance as well, isn't it? Because how full is our cup?
Absolutely.
If our cup is empty and we go into negative, then that can breed poor health. It can breed emotional problems and things like that. So it starts with us. And if you want to show people around you how much they're loved and how worthy they are, love yourself and show that to people.
Absolutely. And there is something called the emotional contagion. So, for example, if I go into an office where everybody is grumpy, everybody is not happy, there's something going wrong, I automatically get that emotions, So the brain has this wonderful and amazing ability to just, capture that emotion and then sort of display it without conscious awareness. And that is called the emotional contagion. How many children fall prey to that? In a relationship, people are fighting, the husband and the wife is fighting, and then they think that, oh, the child is not listening or the child is not aware. Sorry, there's an emotional contagion which is going on. So being mindful of that, being aware of that is extremely important and necessary. And in fact, in the context of the brain, I think you put a very important point here, is that having that mindset, right? Having that abundance kind of a this as well. And that brings us to a lot of points related to manifestation also, which I'm a great, huge fan of in the neuroscience context of it. So what is happening in the brain? Let's see what really happens in the brain. Now, if I want to, let's say there was an experiment which was conducted by Leon Pascal. So he had two groups of people. One group actually practiced piano. The keynotes were actually physically practiced. And in the second group, the person was just imagining playing those keynotes. Now, both the groups were actually having the brain scans. And then what happened in the 3 months process, they studied their brains. Now, the practice group would obviously develop certain parts of the brain because they were actually physically practicing. But the exact same thing was found in the visualizing group as well, which means you were not playing piano. You didn't even look at the piano. There was no piano, but you were mentally practicing those notes and your brain growth is the same. Which gives a very big and important revelation here, that the brain does not understand between a physical experience and a visual experience or an imaginary experience. So I, as a person, getting up in the morning and imagining myself or imagining my life being that I'm full, I have self-love, I can give everything to the world that is there. I am connected to the deeper consciousness or the higher consciousness or higher awareness. I am not in the limited achieved awareness or a small mind. I am that. Then obviously my brain would start to believe that, and my brain would start to give all the right chemicals, the neuroplasticity, the chemistry, the circuits, and that happens. So it's all very interesting, I would say, mathematics of neuroscience.
That's fascinating. And so really, we should start focusing on what we want and visualizing what we want versus what we don't want.
Yeah, I think don't want is also a very interesting thing. If I right now tell you, don't think of a pink snake, what you just did was, boom, the pink snake appeared in the mind. Now, if I tell you, don't breathe, you were breathing all the time, but suddenly now you're conscious. Oh my God, So never say no to the brain, but just have these positive, affirmative visualizations which you carry, because in the brain, literally, it is like a proper mathematics, going from the emotional circuitry, breaking that emotional circuitry, going to the prefrontal cortex, trying to have this regulation. How many times, you get angry? It's a very common thing to get angry, right? If we are studying anger, or there's also a little mathematics of being angry. Why did I become angry? Because there was a desire. Now, I was just parking today, right? But there was no parking whatsoever available. Did it bring anger to me? Why? Because my desire was to park and come on time. So there's always this preceding emotion which plays. That's why it's a mathematics, So you take away the desire or the expectation of how this should be, automatically the anger goes away. So understanding the root cause of it, understanding what is the base of it is very, very important. And all this, I think, is again the awareness or the understanding and being, sort of getting exposed to that in your everyday life. I can't say, oh, this is all theory and then, I'm all right and I would keep doing the same things. In fact, Einstein, I think, quoted that if you want to change your being, you have to change the way you think, Your new mind should come into play. Your new self comes into play when your new mind comes in. So it's all about how are you changing your mind? What are you doing with your brain?
Fascinating. And this nicely takes me onto us helping, say, our audience or inspiring them to take action. So there might be someone sat in DIFC right now, in the UK, in New York, in New Delhi, wherever, and they might have gone through a similar experience as you, or maybe they want to optimize their brain. So what kinds of things can they do to start supporting themselves?
Right. So I think I'm sure, and that is the beauty of life, right? We all go through these experiences, and you have to be thankful. So I'm very, very thankful, first of all, very grateful, and I keep blessing the people who actually led me to have this experience. That is the first thing that you do. And I have a little formula called movers. So I do that in my daily life. movers. So let me just decipher that. What does movers mean? And it's about 30 minutes, giving yourself, I think having this practice of blocking 30 to 40 minutes for yourself every single day as a calendar or penciling that thing is crucial. If you want to just go and be the A player, be the best self of yourself, get the best potentials out of your brain. So M stands for meditation. And there's lots in the meditation which we can talk about, but just sitting there, most of the times, sitting in a particular way or standing in a particular way, sleeping and doing it, or, type of the breathing or type of the mental visual, it's all preparations. I always say, and this is my favorite saying, that you never do meditation. Meditation happens. So meditation is the first thing. The second for me is ocean breath, which I was talking to you about, the victory breathing or the Ujjayi. That has helped me a lot because breath is the only bridge between you as a self and your mind. So when you're trying to control, and it's also called pranayam in the ancient Indian context, it's called prana or the vital force. So that is my absolutely regular daily, I would say a regimented routine. V stands for visualization, which we just talked about. Giving yourself 5 minutes, being very clear on what you want. E stands for a normal exercise. Exercise, I cannot stress less of it. There was a big paper which was released. They studied people who did not get up from their desks, okay? And everybody is right now with the computers. I don't think so. Very few people are in the field jobs, etc. And this is going to go even more as we will have more technologies into our lives. So if you are not taking a break at 20 to 30 minutes, not taking a break, physical break, and walking and coming, and you're just sitting on your desk for a few hours, your mortality, your chances of dying are increased, and you can have an absolute shrinkage of 10 to 12 years in your life. So just imagine, just by moving, that is the change which is happening. But why is it happening? There is BDNF, there's all these wonderful other chemicals, serotonin, dopamine. There's so much happening in the brain. A lot of chemicals which are repair chemicals, a lot of feel-good chemicals. Everything is coming when you're exercising. Take up anything. For me, it's Surya Namaskar. I'm a huge fan of these sun salutations because it's a lot of flexibility into it. There's a lot of stretching. So you kind of, exercise has to be components of balance. There has to be stretching. There has to be muscle building. There has to be cardio. There has to be endurance. So you're kind of taking a shortcut or a route now. There are a lot of people who told me, when they heard one of my previous talks saying that, oh, I can just mentally do that and it's all right because it's building the right circuits. Well, yes, to some extent it is doing that because you get all the chemicals, but then you don't get the joint mobility that you want. So might as well do it in person. R is reading. I'm a very, very rigorous reader when it comes the first thing in the morning. I never touch my phone. The phone is an invitation to all your catecholamines or your stress hormones. The first thing in the morning should never be that, because you are in a state, you're sleeping. So there are 4 fundamental waves in the brain. There's alpha. When I close my eyes and I sit, it's alpha. When I go a little deeper down in meditations, it's theta. When I'm talking to you, when I'm consciously engaging, it's beta. And when I fall off to sleep, it's delta. Now, when I wake up, the delta does not suddenly become beta or should not become beta. From that slow, very slow rhythm, it should get into that little theta and then into that alpha and then into beta. But the moment I open my phone, the moment I start to see all the flurry of messages, there are enough people awake in the night across the world, right? So 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, all those messages in your message box right across Om Night channel, in the mail, in the WhatsApp. And then suddenly you go from this delta to beta and boom, you're not serving your brain. To serve your brain, you have this theta axis in the morning. It's a very, very powerful theta or alpha axis, spending some time reflecting. I think we spoke about that earlier. Self-introspection, giving your time into the routine of what your day is going to be. In fact, I have a very important regimen that I do that when I fall off to sleep, when I'm done thanking everybody that came into my life, I visualize how my next day is going to be. Every single thing I replay in my brain because that means you have prepared chemicals. Now, I also give a little contingency for anything which can go wrong. And I would say, okay, that's my like emergency hour, where I keep plus minus. And so my brain is also prepared. Now, that is very important when it comes to the exercise and the reading part of it or the affirmation. And last is scribing, just writing out anything which was negative, anything which was bothering you, just putting it out, and please not to read it again. And I give this a very, it's a little cliche kind of a thing that you don't, when you vomit, you don't go and search what are you looking for. So once you write it out, it's all your negative catharsis. Just burn it. Just don't look at it again, because you want to just let it out of your system. So that's movers for me every single day for 25 minutes of my life, non-negotiable.
I love this, the movers method. Thank you for sharing that. If anyone out there is inspired by this, please give it a go. And this finding time for ourselves is like the best investment we can do. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that, sharing some of your secrets. I'm sure people will want to know more, and we'll talk more about how they can get to know you. As we sort of start to come to a close in today's episode, you're passionate about the brain. You want to help people. You do a lot of work around the abundance, the love, and you want to help people who are suffering from a neurological perspective. So, what drives you to do what you do?
I believe in something called the psycho, neuro, physio, immuno, endocrinology. And I like to say it as a rapper, psycho, neuro, physio, immuno, endocrinology, which essentially means it all starts in the mind, it goes to your brain, and it goes to your body, to your immune system, to your hormonal system. So I think if I am able to contribute in that mathematics of neuroscience, making people look at that axis as the way it is, and trying to bring out all those pain which they are harboring, or the emotions which are unlocked and stored, and trying to bring them on table with all the scientific experiments, with the lab, with the Limitless lab, with the consultations that I do at Gargash Hospital also. I think that is my vision, or I would say the pain that I went through and the way I came out of the pain. And today, it's the best for me. If you ask today, what do I feel about love? What do I feel about relationships? What do I feel about in general, about the people who are having this connection or disconnection, etc. I feel very blessed that everything has a purpose. Everything serves you, and we are all connected to some level where each of us can lift each other up. If I can lift myself, I can lift a few more. If you lift yourself, you lift a few more. And I think this world can be a beautiful, amazing, excellent place to live. And that is what I wish for every single person on this planet Earth.
What a beautiful passion and a beautiful purpose to have. Thank you for sharing that. So, Dr. Sweta, how can people find out more about you?
Absolutely. So it's www.drswetaadatia.com, and I'm going to spell that DRSWETAADATIA.com. Everything is up there, whatever the work that we do. And we run a club, and very happy if anybody wants to join this Limitless Brain Club, because we all want to be limitless at some point in time. Idea is, let's get rid of the limiting beliefs that we have, try to harness the power of the neuroscience and go to the next level. We run that every second Saturday in Dubai, also online. So if you just go to the website, you'll see a lot of details based on it. I welcome every single person in pain, not in pain, just to even speak to us and be a part of some of our experiments as well. I think we can just hook a few people up, try to show their brains with the QEEG that we do, with all the waves that we were talking about, and just have a objective review of what their brain is all like.
And I'm a part of the Limitless Club, and it's wonderful, a wonderful community, and so much to learn. So I'm hugely grateful for being part of that group with you as well. Thank you for joining today's You Got This podcast. Before we say goodbye, what one tip would you want to share with our listeners today? They may be going through a similar situation as you, or they may be dealing with a life challenge. What tip could you give to them?
Don't take pain as a curse. Pain is a blessing. Don't go through the pain, grow through the pain.
Wonderful. Grow through that pain. Thank you so much for being here. It's a huge pleasure and an honor for me.
Absolutely. Same here.